Welcome to the Forge and Foundry podcast with your hosts, Tony Swatton and Kerry Stagmer. So today on this podcast, we have Ardeshir Radpour. He's a friend that I met while we were filming Man-at-Arms Art of War when I flew into LA and we were shooting that. He was doing some stunts for us and handling some weapons, and we just kind of hit it off. We were also both car guys. He was into, into cars and talked that a fair amount.
Horsepower.
There was an exotic car shop across the street, so that kind of brought that up. And it just seemed like a really good fit. He's very, very active in Hollywood right now and doing a lot of things that we're all familiar with, all the new Star Wars stuff that seems to be going, and Avatar and quite a few other things. But I had no clue that he and Tony knew each other, and there was no connection there for me until Tony and I started talking and brought up things like Deadliest Warrior and all the early stuff that you guys did together. So I want to welcome you to the show, and if you guys want to introduce yourself, obviously Tony Swatton's here with us, and Ardeshir. Go ahead.
All right. So my name's Ardeshir Radpour. I'm a stuntman and actor.
Ardeshir, were you a space pirate in Mandalorian in season 3?
So, what's really funny about that is I auditioned for that head pirate guy. Okay. Not the one on the ship, but the one that was at what's now a school that used to be the bar. So I actually auditioned for that guy. And then one of the actual pirates, that was the dog face. Everybody's like, oh my God, that's you. And I go, no, it's not me. But the prosthetics were made so flawlessly for me that they reused it for somebody else. But I played that particular species in Book of Boba Fett. And so that's one of them was when I played Kaba when Mando comes in. So I get killed. I get cut in half by that Darksaber. And then my head gets removed and taken.
Really? Well, maybe we'll have to have you jump in when we do some filming on that.
Yeah, so if you watch that season, if you watch that episode 5, when it opens up and Mando comes in, I'm the bounty. I'm the second
episode 5 of Mandalorian?
The second person. Yeah, cold or warm or cold, and I chose cold.
Okay, was it Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett?
It's in Book of Boba Fett. In episode 4, I play the king that's sitting opposite Boba Fett across the table. And then the next episode, episode 5, I play a different character of the same species when he goes into the meat locker. In the opening episode, Mando goes into the meat locker. He opens the episode.
Okay, I've only seen one or the other ones because I was a stand-in for Emily Swallow for the Armourer, making the Beskar spearheads to make Grogu's chainmail. So, but that's the only Mandalorian Book of Boba Fett thing that I've seen is myself on camera.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, if you see that, it's really funny too because it's 3 hours of prosthetics, and I had to sit in the chair for 3 hours getting made up, and then I was in Jabba the Hutt's palace, which was just like a kid dream come true, right?
Who did your makeup?
What was that?
Who was doing your makeup? Who was applying it?
Jamie Kelman.
Okay.
Just phenomenal work. They put me in this giant fat suit, and so it's 2 hours and 45 minutes of makeup, and then I had to put the fat suit on and the wardrobe, which of course Shauna, may she rest in peace, Shauna, did all the wardrobe for that. It was incredible. And then I was, in the meat locker, and here comes Mando walking through it, and he says, I'm looking for this guy. And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
He puts the puck on the table, and he's like, that's, basically saying it's me. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't even look like me. Of course it's me. He's got the tattoo on his head. You see it all. So that whole thing happens, and so that was pretty fun. Yeah.
And now let's take a quick break to hear about our episode sponsor. In order to forge the technical builds we make on camera for Man-at-Arms Reforged, it's important that we use the best tools for the job. The same can be said even when the cameras aren't rolling, which is why here at the shop we use the hover pen created by Novium. Whether it's managing orders to ship to our many Renfair vendors or planning our next Man-at-Arms build, hey, no peeking, the refillable, stylish hover pen provides an unmatched writing experience. The perfect combination of art and space, this ballpoint pen sits at a 23.5 degree angle, a nod to the Earth's axial tilt. Available in stylish colors and editions, with Novium you can expect innovative high-end products that inspire curiosity and develop creativity. It's why the Hoverpen Interstellar Edition received the award for one of the best inventions of 2022 by Time. Need an original and timeless gift for a friend, loved one, or even yourself? Consider getting one of the premium editions like the 18-karat gold-plated Hoverpen embedded with a real meteorite shard. Or maybe their latest release, the Hoverpen Future Edition, available as a 2-in-1 fountain and roller pen with an interchangeable tip. Use the code ALLME to get 10% off all Hoverpens. Free international shipping available for most countries, including North America and Europe. Links in the description below. Now let's get back to today's episode of the Forge and Foundry podcast.
So in season 3, I got auditioned for that particular pirate character, but then the Clatoonian that was in the spaceship fighting with them, I didn't go back to do that because they had another guy whose facial features are a little bit different than me. So they didn't want it always to look like me, like the whole species to look like me. So they used another guy, great guy, by the way, Barry. So they put it on him, but it's really funny because the prosthetics fit me so well that when you look at it, everybody's like, that's Ardeshir.
Still looks like you.
Yeah. Still looks like me. Like, that's Ardeshir. And like, well, no, we can tell by the eyes it's not him. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, but literally they made me custom set of teeth. And then I had the teeth for 2 months to practice to speak in them. And then they built the prosthetics around. I had a whole head mold. This is a crazy process. I was just pinching myself the whole way through. I remember at one point they turned the camera so I can see what I look like on camera. I'm like, hey, turn that away. I'm like, why? And I'm like, I'm going to cry. I can't fucking believe I'm here in Star Wars doing this. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm just going to burst into tears. So then, Obi-Wan Kenobi came around, and then I got to do some pretty spectacular stuff in Obi-Wan. Stormtroopers, there's Darth Vader. I got to play one of the clone troopers, Order 66. As far as 501st members go, the 501st Legion, I'm the only member of the 501st Legion that's an actual 501st clone that actually executed Order 66.
Cool.
Live action, not CG.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And it was really funny because you see us get killed, but I also have the videos when you see the Jedi Temple going of me actually killing Jedi. So I actually laid waste to a bunch of Jedi. So that was a lot of fun. So I was in every episode of Obi-Wan except for episode 2. Episode 2 was shot right before I came on board. And then I went and shot from 3 on, and then we went back and shot some stuff for episode 1 as well. So I was one of the clones, and then in episode 3, where they're at the checkpoint, there's a stormtrooper at the checkpoint that stops a transport driver named Freck, and then he interrogates Obi-Wan. That's me. And then a bunch of the sequences. There's a water sequence that everybody thought was CG. It's not CG at all. It's 100% practical. I mean, we got our butts kicked. 24 water cannons hitting us at 80 miles an hour. We were getting drilled. 10 takes. So all of that was practical. And then in every single episode, I'm a stormtrooper throughout the whole thing, or a clone trooper.
We're always going to come back to Star Wars because it's always going to be something that I think we all kind of, are dig. But that's not the only thing that's really hot that you had involvement in from what I'm looking. Because one of the hottest movies out right now. Tell us about Barbie. What did you do with Barbie?
I knew you were going there. I get one picture after another of people standing next to their TVs doing this with me. So here's the funny thing. So I've done a bunch of other, small movies, small things. I was in Westworld. You see my face. Right. I don't get picked up in Westworld. Nobody thinks anything. I was in Batman versus Superman. Nobody says anything. I was in American Sniper. Nobody says. I was all over American Sniper. Nobody says anything. Of course, Star Wars, you can't see. It's either a Stormtrooper helmet, clone, or,
Sure, but that's what lets you do multiple characters.
Exactly.
And that's great, right? It's great.
Well, they asked me, okay, you want to play an Imperial officer? I'm like, no. Oh my God, I want to come back. If it's like the last Star Wars, hell yeah, I want to be like a general going down with the ship. But no, until then, I want to. So then, I did American Sniper, Star Wars. of course, I did Avatar, and that's a whole other story we'll get into because that does deal with weapons. So I did Avatar, but you're blue, nobody's. I get on Barbie, and I got the call for Barbie, and I thought, that's awesome. I mean, Ryan Gosling, and Margot Robbie. By the way, two stunning people. Ryan Gosling is just awesome. So we get there, and I'm like, I don't even know what we're doing. They're like, hey, you guys are just mounted police. You're just going to walk from A to B. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it's in Century City, so we have to be safe. You know what I mean? So to bring the horses in. And I knew the horses, which was really good. Actually, ironically, the horse I'm riding in it is the Man in Black's horse from Westworld.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So I knew that horse. And so, of course, we get on the horse, and they've got these guys coming in, and, Ryan Gosling comes walking up, and he goes, do you guys even know what you're shooting? We didn't know anything about the story, nothing about the script. It's all lockdown.
Right.
And I said, no. He goes, you two inspire me in the movie to think that this is how men should be, cowboys and horses. And I'm like, what is he talking about? Like, because I didn't have anything to put together on this.
Right.
And he's wearing that ridiculous cowboy outfit. He'd walk by, and there's just girls having lunch, and they had no idea what was going on. He's like, hi. And he'd walk by, and they're like, oh crap, was that Ryan Gosling that just walked by? And so we were having fun with this all day long. So, we just get on and we walk by these horses. So I think my call time was I want to say 6 a.m., 7 a.m., something like that. We got in our outfits, sat around, huge base camp, all kinds of people coming and going. We get to set, we do our thing. We chose to stay around to help them safety some other stuff because there was going to be a loose horse scene. I don't even think that made it in the movie. Actually, did it? And regardless, we said, hey, we'll stick around. We'll help you out. We'll do this. Stunt coordinator, she was amazing. Love her. Ingrid, I'll work for her anytime. We just had a lot of fun. We were wrapped by noon. I didn't even eat lunch. So I'm like, hey, that's my stint on Barbie. So fast forward now, I'm like, holy crap, I'm getting everyone recognizing me from Barbie. And it's like the most successful movie of the year.
Crazy,
$1 billion movie with a first female director to cross $1 billion. I'm like, are you kidding me? How did this fall on my lap? I'm used to this shot fall over here, take a spear over here, do all this other stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm on a horse on Barbie. I'm like, okay, that just ended up being like the crazy thing.
So you inspired the patriarchy.
Representative.
Yeah.
So that's the part. I'm like, yeah, we inspired the Mojo Dojo Kaka House. We inspired him for that. Like my little 2.5 second scene, which I just can't. I couldn't have been more grateful for that. It was just fun to meet them and work with them. Simple job. I knew the horse people. I knew the horses. So you couldn't have asked for a better day. And then for this thing to go as big as it did, I loved it. I thought it was a fun movie. It's a super cute movie. Just go there. And it's not about men and women. They trashed Barbie and her idea of what the world is before they ever get to, what do you call it? Ryan Gosling and Ken's characters. I think it's just like this fun little journey that everybody goes through,
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, so that was Barbie.
So let me ask you. I mean, when we met, we're on season 2 of Man at Arms. Art of War. What was your situation? How did you end up involved in that? Like, who was your contact? Was it Robert Rodriguez, or was it somebody behind the scenes, or how did you become involved in the show with us?
That's a good question. I don't remember if I think. It was a contact through, unfortunately, one of the coordinators, I don't know if you remember him, he passed away.
No,
I think, he was the Asian martial artist, the coordinator that was there with the other coordinator. And I think he put my name in. I just remember getting the call for it, and I said, oh my God. I said, guys, I'd love to do the show, but I can't. And they said, no, you would be coming in as an expert as yourself. So to the viewers who don't understand this, I'll explain that. If it's the non-union show, meaning non-SAG, a SAG performer cannot work on it. So because it was non-union SAG, it would have made it difficult for me to work on it. But because I'm representing myself, Ardeshir, as an expert, then you're allowed to go in there and do that. But if I had to perform as, let's say, Genghis Khan or something, then I couldn't do it. So I was like, I'm like, man, I would love to do it. And I had worked with Danny once before, so it was kind of cool. I'm like, I'll work with Danny anytime. Like, he's one of the nicest human beings on the planet.
Yeah. He was so great to spend a few weeks with. I mean, he was really great. I had that spear is actually sitting right here. Yeah, that bronze spear. Yep, from the show.
You know what was so funny? I remember there was the practice spears, and Ilya and I went into the other room while everyone was filming, and we started sparring with the spears, like actual spear combat. And he knew what he was doing with it. And so I was like, well, okay, this is going to be fun. And we started sparring. And I remember going back and forth at it. He couldn't find a way in. I couldn't find a way in. So we're just jarring back and forth. I remember he looked at me and he goes, all right. He goes, a lot of guys talk that they know this stuff. But cool, I can see that you can do this. And all of a sudden we looked left and the whole crew was standing there watching us. And I looked at him like, oh, are we making too much noise? They're like, no. And I forgot who it was. Somebody said, why the hell aren't we filming this? Because it was an actual.
Yeah, that probably would have been Phil. That sounds like Phil. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, why the hell aren't we filming this? And and if you remember, I was like, yeah. They're like, hey, can you do a flourish with this? I go, I don't flourish. Fighters aren't going to flourish. That's all this modern Chinese stuff that you see on TV. Everybody twirling and doing all stuff. I say, fighters don't flourish. They get there. They get into the business. That weapon is a serious tool. They're not flipping around blades to try to make all that stuff happen. All this stuff that you see, half of that stuff would cut them to pieces. Anyway, so I was like, no. So when we got into it, he's like, oh, why aren't we filming this? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, he just had 10 minutes of a really good spar session. So yeah, that was a fun show too to work on. And by the way, it's crazy. I totally forgot about that exotic car place across.
Yeah, right across the street. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of Jags. I'm a Jaguar guy, and so it was pretty cool to talk to that guy a fair amount because there were quite a few early, 120, 140s, E-types, stuff that I've always been into all my life. So it's very cool.
Yeah.
Got my Manual Transmission Society T-shirt on.
Right. Yeah, that was a pretty fun show, and I was really kind of hoping I would run into Danny on set of Boba Fett because he was the Rancor trainer.
Right.
So I was kind of really hoping our paths would cross, but his character was so top secret, and then my characters were so top secret. I was literally walking with. I had a robe on, and it had 4 screens around me so that nobody could take a photo, and an umbrella above me.
That's like, crazy, right?
Like, what am I playing? What character? Twice, and I was like, oh my god! I was like, this is crazy. It was really weird because it was on the, same sound stages. Well, not the exact same sound stages, but at the same studios, Manhattan Beach Studios. So I remember filming Avatar there. So when I was like, I wonder what's going on over there, and we were filming Boba Fett here, and then Kenobi here. And then later on, I remember, I'm like, oh my God, this soundstage that right now the stormtroopers are in, or is, say Luke's, little family house, was the water tank for Avatar. Giant water tank.
Oh, yeah?
Huge. The whole soundstage was a giant water tank. Massive. So it's pretty crazy what they get in there and out of there. What people don't realize is the amount of technology that goes into it. You know what I mean? And labor, that goes into it. And by the way, that's the other thing is I'll tell you, about the archery thing in Avatar. So when I got the job for Avatar, I had messaged the coordinator. He'd requested a speed test on shooting arrows, and I said, okay,
sure,
pretty high number. And he said, I want to see you guys shoot 5 arrows in 9-10 seconds. I said, oh, that's pretty fast. I mean, I know there's nobody around here that can do it. And I said, that's pretty fast. So I messaged him. I said, hey, is this, I won't tell anybody, is this for Avatar? And he said, yes. And he goes, okay. So I said, I need a week because all my bows are 50, 60 pounds and up where I know the other people I'm competing against are going to be doing 20, 25 pound, 30 pound bows.
For quick, yeah.
So I went and picked up I had a 30 pound bow that I had lent to a friend. I went and picked up a 30 pound bow, and I came and I did the test, and he called me up and he goes, "Is this real?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You come to my house." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Listen," I go, "they're never going to shoot this fast. Who cares what the clock says? They just need to look like they're shooting fast. But they need to look like they're archers more than actually being archers, because we're not going to shoot arrows on set. There were specific arrows that were shot on set, but not when you're in the combat.
Not for the combat stuff. Yeah.
So, I said, "Hey, let me, I said, the most important thing is to train them properly. And I trained them military style versus put a target up and they shoot. I trained them as if it was a line of archers. And so my speed test was 5 arrows in 4.5 seconds. So that's why he was like, "Holy crap." I said, "You're just not going to get that speed. It's not even important to get that speed out of these guys. But what they'll need is the technique." So the first week we went, I set up a giant archery wall, and they were shooting, and they were poking holes in the walls. They weren't even hitting the wall in front of them, not a target, a wall.
Right.
By the second week, they were all running and shooting. And by the third week, we were actually running, speed shooting, and actually jumping and flipping. So running and flipping over blocks, little kids. And they came to me, and I was really surprised. The coordinator, who I'm forever indebted to, Garrett, came to me and said, "Hey," he goes, "I got a request. Sigourney Weaver wants to shoot with you." I said, "Wow." And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." Because she doesn't shoot any bows in the movie, but she would love to shoot with you. So she comes in and she goes, "All the kids have been saying their favorite part of the day is the archery." And I was wondering why I don't do archery. Because I would love to do the archery. And I said, "I just got one question for you." She goes, "What?" And she goes, "Well, I don't shoot anything. I just want to do it for fun." I go, "That's not my question." She goes, "What's the question?" I said, "What do I call you? Do I call you Sigourney? Do I call you Miss Reed?" She goes, "Just call me Sig." And I go, "Okay, Sig, can I get a hug?" So she gives me a hug. We just started. And so she joined the archery. So everybody, we had one of the kids was 6.5 years old. And then there was Sigourney. And so everybody was running and shooting. And that came from a background of not sport archery, kind of like, kendo or fencing. It's a sport versus a killing art. Sport archery, everybody shoots and releases this hand. I would never do that in combat archery. I would just be shooting and going right away. So teaching them that type of combat, stuff comes from that background of being around a blade that will cut you, an arrow that will actually kill something, So you learn how to be very efficient in that capacity. And that's kind of what led to, Avatar being able to, and I had to keep that quiet that I did anything on Avatar for a year. Then they found out that I did the archery training on it. A year later, we shot the sequences with the horses when the horses attacked the train. And then we couldn't say a word, not a word, until it aired in 2023 or end of 22, the Christmas of 22. So that's a long time. That's like 6 years. I had to, just can't say anything, nothing at all.
Nothing.
Yeah. And so when everybody was like, "Oh, we filmed Obi-Wan, you have to stay quiet for a year." I'm like, cakewalk. I'm like, that's easy. That's the other thing that I will say. I just want to say about Avatar. What's interesting is Avatar is all motion capture, performance capture, right? It's technically performance capture because they're capturing the performance of the actual people wearing the suits. Steve Brown, who is the assistant coordinator on it, he said something that I absolutely loved about Avatar. He said the only thing that is fake in Avatar is that we are not blue. Everything else is real.
It's pretty much real, yeah. Yeah.
That's true. Everything you see being done on screen, including the whales, it's all people. It's all real. So it's phenomenal to watch that. They actually did that stuff underwater. They did the breaching with the sea wings, when they were jumping out of water, the tumbling that you see, the fights, people getting thrown. That's how tight a ship that they run on that. So you're watching something that looks like potentially a digital character, in reality, a digital character. It actually isn't. It's just painted over an actual human being. In Obi-Wan, we're real. There was no CGI clones like in Revenge of the Sith. Hayden was like just looking around like, oh my God. And he goes, what? He goes, last time there were no clones. I just walked up here alone on a green screen.
Right.
And, I was there, by the way. There was a statement that was leaked by Ewan. I was literally standing there. There was like 3 people standing there when he said that, and I was one of them. When he turned around, he goes, oh shit, there's Darth Vader. He goes, I nearly shit myself when I saw Darth Vader. I asked him, so they leaked that statement, and then he had spoken about it. I was there, and I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I've never seen Darth Vader. I was like, wow, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I only knew Anakin. I go, oh my God, you're right. You never actually saw Darth Vader. So this was the first time he was seeing Darth Vader. And he just walked up to him, looking at him, just amazed. Like he was like looking around going, oh my God. I go, that's how I felt when I walked into the stunt rehearsal room and I saw Darth Vader. I was like, oh my God, my childhood dream, came true. And so when we brought the 501st on for the episodes where the stormtroopers attack in Jabim, Ewan was just looking out, and he's looking out this tunnel, and he's like, oh my God, because look at all those stormtroopers. And I'm like, want to come say hi? He goes, really? You think I should go say hi to him? I go, oh my God, they would love it. He goes, really? I go, Ewan, they're huge fans.
Oh yeah.
So he comes out, and I go, 501st, say hello to Obi-Wan. They go, rah! And he's like, oh my God, I get chills. And then, he turned around, and he's like, thank you guys, thank you. And he's walking away, and he said, I said, Obi-Wan. And he turned around, and I go, we're coming for you. 501st went, rah! So he just kind of like really like ramped up, about that kind of stuff. So it was pretty neat, And what was crazy, cool, by the way, kind of bummed me out, armor related. When I was doing the Jedi Temple sequences for that, which I wouldn't have given up for anything, Order 66 to me, I was like, holy crap. I got called to go work on Babylon as the knights that were attacking in those sequences. I'm like, oh my God. I missed that by 2 days because rehearsals and shoot were overlapping each other. And I had to be there for rehearsals. They're like, we just can't risk it. And I said, I understand. So she's like, just, the coordinator said, just stay on and do what you're doing. I said, oh my God. So that would have been another medieval knight related thing. Right. That would have been. Right.
Yeah, I made armor for Brad Pitt and a crown. Neither one, both of them got cut for that scene. I have the crown. So I've got photographs of him behind the scenes wearing it, and the armor that I made that also he didn't wear. So, but
I'm just telling you, there's so much beautiful stuff like that.
That never makes the cut. Yeah,
it just doesn't make the cut, and it's so disheartening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So I'll tell you a funny story on cuts. I had an opportunity. I've been blessed to work with some people that I admire, like Anthony Hopkins and Clint Eastwood. I mean, holy crap! I mean, I remember telling my dad, I'm like, I just worked with Clint Eastwood. He goes, oh, the guy from Firefox, and I'm like, that's what you remember? Yeah. I'm like, are you kidding me? I said, yeah, Good, Bad, and Ugly. All those other movies. Anyway, so I've had some pretty good opportunities to work with some really nice people, but I got a chance to work on a small feature with Kurt Russell. And it's crazy how many people have brought this up as like some weird cult classic. And I thought it was whatever. We just made this movie. It was fun. It was interesting. It was Bone Tomahawk. It was like, I've seen Bone Tomahawk. I know that crazy scene, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, man, a lot of people have watched Bone Tomahawk. Anyways, it's a cutting room floor story. I was talking with Kurt, and I go, hey, I just wanted to tell you, he just looked and smiled. He goes, I know what you're going to say. Not going to happen. I go, Kurt, I just have to say it. I go, everyone wants to see your director's cut. Because it's not going to happen. I go, we just know there's so much more. Because there is a lot of other stuff that they shot. And he even told me about it. And I spent some phenomenal conversations with him. And he told me some great stories about what they did and how that movie came about and what was going on and just how it was dealing with those actors. I kind of use those moments as like a learning. I watch them act. That's my acting class. Everybody goes, what acting school do you go to? I'm like, I'm on set all day. That is my acting school.
Right,
watching
exactly.
those guys. But it's really funny because you're talking about cutting room floor, and I'm like, oh my God, what's on the cutting room floor of like Tombstone or Excalibur or Conan. What the hell's on the cutting room floor of that show? Those kind of things. I'm like, oh my God, there's just so many of those things, So yeah. So putting it all together, all that weird crap that I was doing as a kid or interests that I had. I mean, one of my favorite movies growing up, obviously, was Star Wars. Okay. Sure. I loved Star Wars. But if anybody really knew me, it was also Excalibur. So to me, I would watch like Star Wars, Excalibur, Conan, these movies I loved. So then I would get a chance to see, like say Tony's stuff. And I'm like, what the hell? This stuff is, you can actually do it. So it kind of inspired me. Yeah, it would inspire me to put my own stuff together. And now even like my armor, my jousting armor that I wear is kind of modeled a little bit after, not quite the giant version of it, the aluminum version of it that you see in Excalibur, but, with the blade blocks and all that stuff. And my friends from childhood, they're like, holy crap, you did it, man. You've got Uther and Arthur's, style armor. I said, yeah, and it's a vision that I would have, and I would just go after it, and so, it's been a pretty fun journey, taking that chunk of your childhood and making it come alive. It was really funny. The only thing that we can't make come alive, of course, is what? Like Dragon Slayer, right? I love that dragon. Irmithrax, love that dragon. So when I was on Avatar, there was this giant picture of a Banshee on the wall, or what they call an Ikron on the wall. And I looked at, James Cameron was saying, I go, the only thing I hate about Avatar, and he just looked at me like, what? And I go, that thing is not real, because I would be saddling that bastard. And he just went, all right. And he walked away. And I'm like, and they looked at me like, did you just say that to James Cameron? I'm like, hell yeah, he invented a creature that I totally associate with. I'm like, wow, man. I'm like, oh yeah, are you kidding me? So yeah, it's this weird childhood thing of the armor and all this stuff coming, to life. That's just been, a crazy journey.
Yeah. Where did your armor, did you do a bunch of the work on your armor, or did you have it made?
No. So the armor is pieces that I got separately here and there. And then just from the stuff that I've watched or just naturally gained myself, but like watched, Tony and everybody else do. I'm like, okay, this doesn't quite fit right. So I would cut it apart and then kind of hammer it down and Dremel this piece down or grind this piece down. Right. First of all, by the way, I had no idea people did grinding on armor. I watched that from Tony. I was like, are you kidding me? So, I was like, wow. So, so I bought these pieces here and there, heavy gauge stuff here and then. I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I want it to look. This is how I want it. So, like in my armor, I can actually move around, It's not the armor that, some of my friends have that, $30,000, $40,000 suits of armor. It's not that. But I kind of pretended as if I was the kid in the village who was like, hey, man, there's somebody dropped a bicep here or somebody dropped a forearm here. What can I do with it? You just build your own suit of armor. You're like, they're going to call you. You're going to go into battle. What are you going to do with a pot on your head and eventually start piecing things together? Or say you found something on a battlefield. How would you piece that stuff together? The leather work on the armor, I'd been doing leather work for quite some time. Probably actually right around the same time I met you, Tony.
Yeah, you were doing the saddles.
Just got a little bit better. And what was that?
You were doing the cavalry saddles, the Roman cavalry saddles. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started doing, that was a nightmare, but it's a piece of my pride.
Yeah.
So I did the leather work came a lot easier for me. So like the scabbards for the bows and the quivers, the linothoraxes, the Greek and Persian style linothoraxes. So I could make all that leather stuff. I had made my leather armor. I made my entire armor that I wore during the USC, football game, the shoes and everything, So that was kind of a little bit of a merging of those two worlds, And then I've always been a very artistic-minded person, so I would look, I'm like, if he does this like this and he does this like this, how can I get those two pieces to come together, And something that was, unattainable, became a little bit more attainable to me. And then, of course, there was some stuff that, it was just, I didn't have the time to learn it and how to do it or whatever. And so I would go down. I'm like, okay, I've got this, Roman armor. I did this to it. hey, Tony, how can I get this helmet? And then Tony introduced me to Tony Felden, and then he's like, I've got these helmets, and then I would go buy the helmet, and I'm like, okay, cool, I've got the helmet. I still have them, all of them. A bunch of Roman swords and helmets from Tony, and then I remember one time I came back and I'm like, hey, I'm never going to use this infantry helmet, but I really want a cavalry helmet. And Tony's like, hey, just come swap it out. And I'm like, I made some good people in life. I'm like, this is some good karma. So yeah, and so they ended up, doing. So what's crazy, by the way, Tony? So when Hail Caesar was being done, they remember that opening scene with the Romans marching and all the slaves and everybody. They went in there and they said, hey, we're going to bring in some guys with the horses. I said, okay. So I went in with the stunt coordinator on that. And they said, hey, we really want some Roman saddles and Roman armor and Roman. I said, okay, cool. I said, well, the Roman armor, they're like, no, we have all the armor. We ordered it all. I'm like, okay. Fast forward, I went and it was literally like what it must have been like to film Ben-Hur. There was just barrels of shins, barrels of chest plates, all the polyurethane armor and stuff like that. And so they said, hey, but we really want some Roman saddles and stuff. And I just knew that you can't get the Roman saddles. There's only a handful of people that make them, and they're like $3,000 or $1,800 or whatever, if you're lucky. And they're all in Europe and whatever. And I said, you're just not going to get them. And they said, all right, the prop master knew me, and he goes, I'll pay you to make them. I said, I'm not going to make them. I said, because they had seen my saddle. I'm jumped forward. I said, well, I'll tell you what. We can use, my buddy has his, he can use his. I have mine. I'll use mine. We'll make you some others. But we'll make them cheap, but we get to keep them. So what we did was we took some, and I told them it'll be a conversion. I said, we took some McClellans and we converted them to Roman saddles. So they're built, like if you look at it, you're like, oh crap, that's a Roman saddle. And they said, oh, well, we want some bridles and breast collars. I said, sure, no problem. So we made all that stuff. So we get to maybe a couple of weeks out from shooting, and they said, hey, the chariot stuff came in. I said, oh, okay. So we went and looked at the chariot stuff, and I'm like, so where is it? Like, that's it. And I'm like, it's plastic. I'm like, this is harnessing on horses. This is plastic stuff. Right. How is this going to work?
Lick and stick. Right?
Not even. Coordinator, Tad, who I was his assistant, he put it on the horses, and he did a test, and it busted. The chariot broke off. The horses took off. I was like, holy crap. We're glad he did this test before, George Clooney gets on this chariot. And then being blind drived by a stunt guy, we were like, oh my God. So, but here's the funny story about this. So I had just, gotten a cavalry helmet from Tony, and it's the one that I swapped out. It was an infantry helmet for a cavalry helmet. I'm like, Tony, I'm just never going to use this infantry helmet. He's like, yeah, come pick it up. So I pick up this cavalry helmet. I put it all on. I'm on this horse. I've got these beautiful photos. And of course, there's pictures of me with Tommy Trojan stuff. I'm like, okay. And then I've got the Praetorian helmet and all this other stuff. So I go to this meeting with them, and they've got this huge board up with pictures to the left and pictures to the right. And to the left is all the shit they don't want. And to the right is all the stuff that they want. I said, yeah, I can do that for you. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, that helmet, that, all this stuff, that's not a problem. Like saddles, like, yes, you can do this. And I say, yeah, sure. They're like, are you sure? Because people have been saying, and they were getting angry. I'm like, why are you getting angry with me? They're like, oh, no, it's just been tense because people have been saying this. Like, listen, man, we've had some problems. We just want to make sure that, if you put your word on this, that you can do this. That's just sure. I'm like, yeah, well, how can you prove that to us? I go, why don't you take a closer look at your pictures? And they looked in, they brought their heads close, and they looked and like, oh, crap, it's you. I said, yeah, you guys downloaded pictures of me that's on there, and the spatha. Remember the Roman spatha I got, Tony? Yeah. So it was the Roman spatha and the chainmail and the helmets. Like, oh my God. And I said, yeah. So it was really funny. The coordinator was like, I can't believe you were in a meeting and they're telling you. I'm like, yeah, just take a closer look, man. All the photos you selected online were actually me. So it was pretty funny. Perfect. So that segued into Hail Caesar. And of course, they made us wear their armor and everything. Tidbit about that, I took 3 of my buddies that were on horses. I was the only one that wasn't spray painted tan to look like an Italian. Every one of them had to go over there and get spray painted. And I was laughing. It's like, did he put any makeup on you? I said, no. Yeah, so, yeah. So it's kind of weird. My natural interest in even the Roman stuff, then all of a sudden comes back to, being on set, with Hail Caesar, that kind of stuff. So it's all been a very interesting mesh.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's great. So, is there anything you can talk about on the Skeleton Crew?
I can tell you I'm on Skeleton Crew.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
And
I know it's premature to talk about. I figured I'd ask.
To be fair.
When does that come out?
So Skeleton Crew was supposed to come out, I think,
December.
this Christmas, but because of the strike and everything, there was some stuff that slowed. It pushed it. I'll be totally honest. Even if I wanted to tell you something about Skeleton Crew, I couldn't tell you.
Sure.
It's so they've done.
I didn't know if there was anything public. Really, I haven't seen anything, but I didn't know if there was anything public. So
no. So what I will tell you about Skeleton Crew is that I was on Skeleton Crew.
Well, we'll come back to it at another time.
When it gets released.
It's weird. There were some leaks on some of the other shows. Unfortunately, they did such a good job, and I agree with it. By the way, they did such a good job at locking Skeleton Crew down that even I was like, I wasn't locked down like this, before. Like on Obi-Wan, the stunt crew was awesome. I mean, there was nothing being leaked out. But from some background, there was some stuff that was being leaked out. And I remember looking at Deborah Chan, I'm like, what's going on? She goes, oh, we got a leak. And I was like, oh, really? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, it's stunts? And she's like, no, somebody in background. But there's so much background that sometimes you can't tell who. And that was happening on Westworld. So Skeleton Crew, even for my own purposes, like in my brain right now, I couldn't tell you what it was about. And that was the same way with Avatar. They did such a good job with that. And that whole crew on Avatar, Garrett and Steve, they run such a nice, tight ship on that. Just picking the right people. Nobody talks. And their mocap troupe, just a great group of people. Was probably one of the most incredible groups of people I work with. And and James, he's just so Jim Cameron is just so on what he wants and his script that they don't really release it. So at one point I was helping him previs some stuff and had no clue what I was doing. We were just we're going to shift this way, we're going to shift that way. This is what but we had no idea who it was. So they do a really, really good job, with that. So yeah, I can tell you Skeleton Crew. That's it. I can tell you.
That's cool, man.
Old Man Season 2. Just right. Yeah. Even Barbie, cool. I couldn't say anything on until it came out.
Sure. That makes perfect sense.
Me and my 2.5 second part, I couldn't even say anything about that. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm excited about Skeleton Crew, though. I think from what I saw, it looks pretty awesome. But again, just gotta wait.
So it must be great. You go to Tony's and see. There's so much stuff there from so many things that we've all watched. It's amazing to go to his showroom, isn't it?
What's interesting is before I got into any of this stuff, I was just a huge fan of Excalibur and Conan and Dragon Slayer and all those movies, of course, Hook and all that other stuff. And so I was at USC and I was playing polo, and I would go down to Riverside Drive in Burbank, and there was a polo shop there, and there was a guy I became friends with. And one day I was just driving by, and my head just looked to the left, and I said, what the hell? And I look, and I see all this armor in this window, and I see this Gothic, horse armor and German knight, and I'm like, oh my God, I spun a Yui and came around. And then I looked, and it was Sword in the Stone. I'm like, oh my God, I've heard of Sword in the Stone. I had another friend of mine who, had told me about it, but I was, never really investigated it. So it's really funny. I go knock on the door, and of course, no answer. And then I get, an answer from the back, like, like, what's going on? I'm working. And I'm like, nothing. I just wanted to look. And sure enough, Tony was gracious enough in the middle of God knows what the hell he was making, came up, opened the door, let me take a look around. No obligation to do so. So I was really like, wow, this is amazing. So I would go and look around in there, and we kind of talked a little bit of armor and stuff like that. And then, so I would go down to Burbank. I would, just go and stop by and just take a look. And sometimes he was open, sometimes he wasn't. Sometimes, I'd go in the back and watch him do some pretty cool stuff. And I'm like, all right, I got to take off. I got to go do my stuff. So it was kind of there. And then I was also heavy into, history, big time history. I was, getting a degree in history as well. And one of the things that really fascinated me was always, of course, I'm Persian, Zoroastrian Persian. So Cyrus the Great, and Xerxes, and then the Sasanians and King Ardeshir and all, Shapur and all that. But you never saw any of that stuff. So I remember going in there and kind of, talking to Tony about it. And he's like, yeah, there just really isn't much of that stuff around. There's Roman stuff, but not really any of that stuff. None of the Sarmatians, Parthians, Sasanians, Achaemenids, none of that stuff. So then I get this stupid idea in my mind that, well, I get tired of being represented as Arabs in media. No disrespect to my Arab friends. I don't mean it that way. I mean, hey, we are who we are. They are who they are. And so I started making some stuff. So, of course, I'd go down there and I'd ask, Tony 50 questions, and, he'd explain 3 things that I understood, and slowly it turned to 5 things and 10 things. And I would go home and I would take 30 seconds of what I would see from him and then just kind of reverse engineer it like a monkey and figure out how to make like a coil for chainmail. And so I slowly just kind of started doing that stuff. But then, so I was playing polo professionally after I graduated USC. Well, actually, yeah. So I played polo at USC. Then I started playing professionally. And right after I graduated, I ended up being asked to come and ride the horse during the USC football games. And I was asked to ride that horse by the wife of the gentleman who actually started that tradition at USC.
Was that Joanne?
No. Before Joanne, that was Pat Sacco.
Okay.
So Richard Sacco's wife, and I had met Richard. So of course, then Tony was tied to USC as well, and Tony had, was working. He had made their swords and all this other stuff. They wouldn't let me carry a real sword. So
Yeah.
Well, there's a funny story to that one too. So they wouldn't let me carry a real sword, and the sword that Tony had made for the drum major is pretty spectacular. It's big though, and there's just no way I could hide that sword.
It's ridiculous.
It's a hideable sword. That thing is made to be shown and displayed, and so of course I start rebuilding the armor because the armor was getting old. This helmet that they had fabricated just was a bowling ball. It was terrible. And I was like, yeah, I can't wear this thing. I think it was made out of a motorcycle helmet. Anyway, so I made a helmet. Ironically, it was the exact copy of what's on the statue. So there was kind of a little bit of an argument that went back and forth, and then they wanted the helmet to be metal, cardinal, and gold. So Tony made a helmet, spectacular looking helmet, again, in metal, in bronze, actually.
Bronze with a horsehair.
Bronze, horsehair, right? So all this stuff. I remember Tony's hands just gunked up in red dye from the dyeing the
horsetail, yeah.
Horsehair. So my helmet had a white plume. It was actually all the Traveler hair that was in it. So I had taken hair from Travelers 1 through 5 and made the crest for it. They didn't want the white hair. And I was like, okay, whatever. So Tony makes his helmet. Beautiful helmet. We go through this giant fiasco with the university. It was more politics. They just nixed it. They paid for it and everything, and then they nixed it. I'm like, what the hell? So when it came down to the sword, I'm like, there's just no way I'm going to get Tony to make another sword. And then they say no and all this other stuff. So I just bought a regular Roman gladius.
Right.
Tony had one there, and I was like, all right, I'm going to buy this sword, and didn't tell him why and all this other stuff. I'm like, crap, it doesn't have a sheath. So I ended up buying this kind of, neat little prop sheath, but it was actually really nice looking sheath. Put the whole thing together, stuck it on the side, and never told anybody. and just rode into the stadium. And I just drew the sword, and everybody went, "Oh crap! Look at that!" And they loved it. So since then, they've been carrying a real sword.
Right. Once it's there, once it's there, they can't send it away.
So, but I had a couple of things that I did like that. Like Dr. Bartner asked me, he literally approached me. I heard you can. I said, yes, sir. And he goes, and you're not going to get rehearsal. I said, no worries, sir. Never been done before. I said, no problem, sir. And he goes, and you can't tell anybody. I go, understand, sir. Took a spear in. I remember I went in there and bought a spearhead from Tony, just this random spearhead. I was like, I can't even tell him, how am I going to do this? And it made this big, giant, Sarasa style, not quite that long, obviously, but sword, spear, carried that and laid it in the corner of the, Coliseum. And when I came out, so I was able to pull off a bunch of monkeying stuff like that. But as that was going on, I was getting the craving to build also Persian armor. So then I would go in there and I would ask Tony about this. And as I got into making chainmail and things like that, I made one sword. I probably will never make another sword. It's just too time consuming. You guys are nuts. What you do, I'm like,
I mean,
Tony's place is a freakish place for guys like me, because you walk in there. Because here's the thing: people will walk in there and see the hook, right? It's just how famous is that hook?
Yeah,
I'm like, I don't even care about the hook. I'm like, I get it. It's a prop. Yeah. It's cool. It's awesome. I see everything else that's in there. Little greeblies that filleries, little buckles, all those little things. Because, once you put it all together, you get the item.
Right.
But what people don't realize is how many different little pieces come together to make something that's really neat. That, so Tony, I'll tell you something Tony taught me. So I wanted to put these little fillery type things on certain pieces of armor. And Tony's like, he goes, I don't really want to make this for you. It's going to be too expensive. And I'm like, well, how much is that going to be? And he's like, it's going to be like $40 a piece. And you need like 40 of them.
Right.
If not more. And I'm like, yeah, that's way too much. He goes, well, I teach you a little trick. And I'm like, what is that? He goes, go to Bed Bath & Beyond or, Home Depot. So everyone since that day has been like, where are you going? I'm like, Bed Bath & Beyond. Not to buy pillows or soap or any of that crap. They're like, immediately they say, what are you building now? Bed Bath & Beyond, directly as a result of Tony, because you can find Roman fixtures and stuff for like a one-off for a chest piece, for like a piece of armor, or like on the Tarugis on Greek armor or Roman armor or Persian armor or something like that. But what people don't realize is all those little tiny things that you walk into Tony's place that you see, the little dagger here, the little belt buckle there. I'll walk in there and probably see 50 things that I have absolutely no use for, but genetically I'm like, I have to have.
All right.
It's like walking into an idiot's Costco. Like, you can't walk into a Costco and not leave without something. For me, the dangerous part is you walk into Tony's place. I'm like, I don't know why I left with this giant horse armor, but I can't put it on any horse. It's too big. So, but I had to have it, that type of a thing. That's the interesting thing. And then you walk in there, before I would walk in, I'm like, oh my God, from this movie, that movie, or this or that or whatever. But now I'm more fascinated by, the intricate little tidbits of work and detail.
The assemblage of it.
And Tony and I are tool junkies, so we go right for the tools in anybody's shop. Yeah. Pretty quick. But we're looking for the most obscure weird thing. But you just never know.
But also assembled
the trick that I can use a railroad tie, a railroad track piece as an anvil.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh.
One of the things that blew my mind is in high school, I was doing powerlifting and everything, fascinated with Conan and, making knives with Jody Sampson and everything. And then I wanted Arnold's costume with all the cool leather work and the studs everywhere. And I had a chance to restore it for Arnold in the early 90s. And all of those cool studs on everything are upholstery tacks that are pushed through the leather and doubled under. And you can get all kinds of bitchin' upholstery tax.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm saying is people don't understand that. You like look at this stuff and I'm like, it's not that we're using upholstery tacks to make armor. What people don't realize is that the upholstery tacks were designed after armor pieces.
Exactly.
From Pompeii or from Edinburgh or something like that. They found this beautiful artwork that these armorers had made back then, and then they use it for furniture parts. I'm like, well, goddamn, we can reverse engineer the furniture parts back into armor pieces.
Right, from drawer pulls.
Yep.
Exactly. So there was a lot of neat little tricks I learned, when I would go in there. And then the problem with Tony's places, I would go in there and I would look at the different types of Roman swords. Remember that debate that I would always have? I would just stand there. I'm like, which one do I want? Well, this one's got a straight blade, but that one's got a full-on blade. And this one is and I'm like, oh my God. I had to discipline myself at some point to just focus on the thing that I need and call it a day. And I haven't been able to do that.
What you need, because it's not a want, it's a need. Yeah. We all understand that.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. So I have a formal dining room in the house. This is my office, which is all the Star Wars stuff. But I have 3 suits of Persian armor up on mannequins, and people walk in, they're like, holy crap, it's a museum. They look and they go, oh wow, they don't know how to process it. I've got a garage full of stuff and an office full of helmets I'm looking at right now. So what's really funny about it is what I try not to take for granted. People come to my house and they look at that. I'm like, what do you think you would do if you walked into Sword in the Stone? Your eyes don't know how to process how much stuff is there, You literally live in Leeds Armory.
And it's very, very different from what it is here because we don't keep any finished product. I mean, there's some man-at-arms weapons, you know what I mean? There's some of the stuff from man-at-arms is probably, 80 or 100 pieces from the shows. But as far as the regular product where Tony keeps a rental and he keeps, things for sale, we have nothing here. Everything is wholesaled out to dealers. And so there's, 1,000 swords in process, but there might not be, on a given day, there might not be a single finished sword here in stock because we're
but here's the thing, though,
as fast as we can.
He's he's right there in the hub. So if somebody needs a hero piece, that they need, look, no one's going to be walking in going, hey, we got this battle sequence going on. Tony, I'd like to borrow this, No, I'm not going to let you ding it up and bang it up and bring it back to me used. I gave it to you new. You're going to give it. Also, you don't want to hurt the actors or stunt performers or whatever. But when they need those hero pieces, where are you going to go? How are you going to find those pieces? You just can't. Yeah. It's an actual freakish anomaly that something like, Tony's is there. You can go to Western Costume and you'll see piles and piles of armor and stuff like that. But what is it? It's a mishmash of stuff, and it doesn't always look right. You could tell somebody, go in there and get me some medieval outfit. And when they come back and I'm like, what the hell is this thing that you came back with? But then when they, when they want something like, a hero blade or, helmets or whatever, I actually, what's really funny is my Praetorian helmet, Tony, that I had, I got, actually, I wasn't even in the film business at this time. I wore it on a student film for USC. And I went to wear the helmet, and the guy's like, you can't wear the helmet. And I'm like, why? He's like, because all the stuff that we rented is just crap.
Yeah.
And it's going to show that your armor is so different than that. And I was like, well, there's a way to fix that. They're like, what? I go, it's the shininess of the helmet, right? And they're like, yeah. I go, why don't I just loan you guys, 2 other helmets? And they're just like the rental, I just rented them. He was a student. So I'm like, hey, give me $50. And he's like, no problem. But it's just like the Topeka helmets, the original old Topeka helmets or whatever. They go, oh, okay. And it kind of saved the show for them. So, you're in this situation where you're looking at this armor and you're like, well, if you want to shoot something really good, you want to see something really nice, this is how it's going to look. Now, in my opinion, the way they're going with a lot of this urethane armor, they've now gotten to the point where they can make it look like real armor. So because it's the painting, they'll cast it from, say, something that Tony makes. They'll be like, hey, make me a helmet. He makes a helmet. They're like, okay, now I need 100 of these. They'll mold it and cast it, and then they'll paint it to look that way. But in my opinion, when you're wearing the real stuff, you get the feeling of it.
Yeah,
sure.
You know, you feel what it means to wear, you know, a real armor and go down. I did a sequence where I was Cortez chasing these Indians down through the forest in real armor.
I was talking to Brian Forrest about that.
What was that?
I was talking to Brian Forrest about that today in Deadliest Warrior. Small world, huh?
Very small world. So, hey, I'm running these natives down, and this guy, he goes, oh my God, he goes, it was terrifying watching you come down on me like that. He goes, oh my God, I was insane. And I said, yeah. And he asked me, he goes, how did you feel? I said, I felt like I understood why they did it, because they were out of their mind. Once you put it on, you got so into it that you're like, I'm just going to do my job. I'm going to run this. You're not even asking why.
Right.
So people don't realize when you get into that garb, you understand what they went through. You understand how it feels. Of course, we're not killing. We're not doing anything like that, but it helps you get into a different character. When you put the plastic stuff on, not stormtroopers, but when you put the plastic stuff on, everybody treats it as if it's a piece of junk.
Right.
So they're like, whatever. And, you know, and by the way, I'm sure Tony gets this asked a million times, but every once in a while people ask me, okay, can I borrow one of your outfits for Halloween? I'm like, get this straight. You want me to loan thousands of dollars worth of stuff to your drunk butt at a party with a bunch of other drunk idiots? And how's that going to come back to me? And what shape is that going to come back to me?
Right.
We've cleaning vomit out of chainmail for a year. You know? Yeah, but on set, I feel like, you know, when they want to do something right and they want it to look right, it just looks different when you can go and get, you know, actual proper hero, even fantasy stuff. And I don't say this lightly. I say this in all seriousness. You can leave this bullshit world that we've made for ourselves today, where everything is throwaway, and actually kind of tie into something that you're like, not back then or today would I throw this away, what I've made or what was made for me. You know, that type of a thing. There's nothing disposable about that stuff. I mean, unless you're dead on a battlefield, nobody cares then. But my point is, there's some pride. I don't think you take for granted any day ever the life you get to lead, right? In that armory.
You know, it's like, you know, Kerry and I were talking about it. I mean, we're getting older. We're trying to figure out our exit plan. My exit plan is to downsize and continue doing this until I can't. Yeah. Because
absolutely,
that's we're all living the dream. We're all doing what we love to do, and you know, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah,
yeah, it is really great, and it is something where, you know, as you hit a certain age, which I'm hitting, and Tony's older than me
by a few months. You respect your elders.
And so you know, we are slowing down, and you know, we're definitely thinking about it. You know, it's one of those things where you have to, you know, you got to contemplate, you know, the physical end of what we do. It's a little different for me because I have a pretty big staff here. And so I have guys down, you know, well, the regular guys are down to about 25, you know, age-wise. And then we have some younger guys, but all the younger guys are like engineering students. So they're not coming into this business probably, you know. But like you, it could be a situation where they find their love of life is not in the direction that they were going.
But there's also a connection. You know? But there's also a connection. Like, for example, okay, so I was running a tech company, but every single day I was riding my 5 horses. I had 5 horses at the time. I have 2 now.
Sure.
So every day I needed to touch something, and people would come out and be like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I would be wearing one of my suits of armor in the morning. Right. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, living a life you only dream about. It would be foggy. And I would go out into the hills in Chatsworth or Porter Ranch or whatever. And I would be riding, and there's fog and stuff. And I go, you watch it on TV, I get to live it. And then I would put on like, you know, a journeyman's coat and a tricorn. And, you know, and I have a rapier that I bought from Tony that I would just put it on and go out for a run. And I'm like, you guys watch a movie like Brotherhood of the Wolf or Three Musketeers or whatever, and you fantasize about it, and then you think it's stupid. Yet all I do is watch you drink a glass of expensive wine and piss it away, and you have nothing to show for it. but I get to live what you're watching and romanticizing on TV. I don't romanticize this. I get to live it. So even now, like I'll get into a situation where I'm talking, with my girlfriend, and she goes, "Oh, I can't wait, to get back." And she says, "What do you want to make?" And I'm like, "Breast collars and breech straps for the horses." Medieval breast collars and breech straps. Which means what? Which means at some point there's going to be leg armor and then arm armor.
Right, yeah.
And then you get to riding. So I actually use this stuff even for my own personal enjoyment. Times I just want to go and ride it and I just want to do that. I was like, what am I? I'll grab a spear and a flag and they're like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, just training my horse. So my horse stays nice and tuned and trained and ready to do what he needs to do. And, and if there was a situation where they called like, hey man, we need to get a horse that's going to come in right now and joust or do this or do that. I'm like, I know my horse is ready. But also I'm fulfilling that romance that lives within me of Conan and Excalibur and the Musketeers and, and Tombstone and all that stuff. I get to live that stuff as opposed to just as a spectator, observe it. I'd rather be on the other side. I'd rather play baseball than watch it. That type of thing. Yeah. And I think you guys, the reason why you guys say your exit plan, I'm just going to speak on your behalf and you correct me if I'm wrong. Because I know what you guys are thinking and I think the same thing. I think the reason why you guys say our exit plan is not to sell and relax, but to downsize is because you can't get away from that creative part of making it.
Yeah,
right?
Not at all.
I can't
not ever.
Get away
not
from
ever.
Make this. I can't get away from making this stuff. So, to me, do I need to make another saddle? I have 50 saddles.
I have 500 hammers, but I could stop at any time.
Who cares? I don't give a shit. Nobody cares about the wine you've been drinking. But, when you make something, you're like, hey, man, I went through this creative process. Your body is actually, I think, releasing endorphins, so you're getting that kick, but also you're absorbing the creativity. You know what I mean? Well, Tony, when did you ever see me walk into your place and not go, so I'm soaking in stuff. You're soaking in that artwork. You know what I mean?
And it was pretty fun. Well, the last time, and I didn't realize you had come into this location. You came in with Peter Lyon from Weta. And Peter was just like, he was just like, what the hell?
So the funny story about Peter. So Peter and I met on another thing that we were shooting that hasn't been released. And we were talking about ancient warfare, which of course, Peter and I, when we got together, we were talking about Lord of the Rings, probably one of my favorite things ever done. So we're like, Lord of the Rings. What about the Persians? I'm like, I know plenty of them. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's so we were talking about Lord of the Rings, and then we started talking about Persian warfare, Greek warfare, Macedonian warfare, Armenians, Romans, that kind of stuff, Byzantines. So the show focused kind of on that type of tactical warfare that was going on back and forth, there. So we really sat down and started talking swords and started talking armor and weapons. And he was telling me, when they were making this is one of the reasons why I love Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. He said, he wanted everything to have some base in reality, especially, the Rohirrim or, the Gondor, soldiers, or all the swords were made off of swords that were actual pieces, obviously made a little bit more elvish or made a little bit more ranger or made a little bit more this or that. Which I thought was fascinating because why reinvent a wheel that, what are you going to come up with, Tony, that 100 other Tonys haven't come up with? Nothing. You're going to come up with something that adds to all those 100 other Tonys before you. And now you're one of those Tonys. And you're like, okay, thank you for getting me here. Now I'm going to take it to the next step. And then you're handed off to the next Tony. So we were talking about all that stuff.
Because it's all about the Tonys.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got this vast knowledge of the weaponry, and then we were talking about armor. So he's like, hey, I'm coming into town. I'm really looking forward to going to see Tony Swatton. I'm like, how have you not seen Tony Swatton? In my world, Tony Swatton and Peter were this. They were already connected. I'm like, how's that not happening, right? Like YouTube. So this add to what Tony was saying. We walked in there and Peter was like, "Oh my God!" He could not stop. This is a guy from Weta.
Right.
This is a guy who,
the Swordmaker. Yeah. I mean, basically, right? He's the designer. Yeah.
He was doing insane stuff. That he comes in, he just the entire time we were there, right, Tony?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. And he was doing the same thing I do, looking at these look at these buckles, look at these little greeblies. Where does he get this? I don't have access. I have to make this work. He's just one after another after another. And I think because, like, in his world, as big as Lord of the Rings is, that's what he was seeing, right? Lord of the Rings, which, believe me, trust me, is a dream come true. Now, he's done other stuff. That's not what I'm saying.
Sure.
When you go into Tony's world, what are you looking at? Romans, Greeks, Scottish, French, Napoleonic era, you know what I mean? Gladiator era. You're looking at
Star Wars.
Star Wars, Gothic, Tommy Trojan. There's just so much to fulfill anybody who has ADD like all of us do. There's just so much eye candy there that you're like, wow, this is paradise. So Peter was like, holy crap. So that's another crazy small world.
Right.
Know?
Do you know Chris Menges, his apprentice?
I don't.
Chris has also been here. And if you thought Peter lost his mind, Chris just like...
Yeah. Oh, sure. I met Peter's wife. Peter and his wife came. She was darling. But I did not. I'm sure how could you not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who...
there's certain things that get old. And certain, like, I can come down tomorrow, Tony, to see you. And it'll be like the very first time when I left Argentina Polo and came around. I was like, oh, my God, let me see this. So... It's just for people like us, it doesn't get old.
Yeah.
And it's not gimmicky.
Yeah.
And it's not gimmicky. You know what I mean? It's not something, that you just post for Instagram and then you're on to your next thing, This is me in Dubai, and then this is me on a horse.
Right.
And this is
well, it's just like, you mentioned Zorro, and he didn't know you were going to mention Zorro, and the sword was within arm's reach of him.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
What do I got here?
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, watch.
Here we go. We got Zelda's sword. Here's the Master Sword from Zelda. There's Zorro's sword.
Right.
Here's Zorro.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Excalibur. So here's Excalibur.
To me, that sword he just held standardized everything in medieval world. And it was fantasy.
Yeah.
If you think about it, I loved Arthur with Charlie Hunnam. I thought he did a great job. It's an Arthurian Lord of the Rings. He did a great job. I thought it was a great take on how they did it. But no one has touched Excalibur.
Not like John Borman, no.
Yeah.
Nobody. Because in your mind, when you think of Excalibur, what did you think of? You thought of, the castle of silver and gold, the knights in shining armor, all that stuff. No one has touched it. They keep trying and they keep failing.
Yeah.
Not even come close. No disrespect to the other people who made, other movies. That's not what I'm saying. But in my mind, I either left with Charlie Hunnam's Arthur and went into the Lord of the Rings type of a world, or I will always stay. So hence my armor, I kind of went about the path of doing something Arthurian,
Right, with the, you said the hout piece,
the blades,
the Elvises.
They're smaller, they're not as big as theirs was.
Yeah.
You know what? One thing that I would love to do is just for that armor, make the shiny version, not the black version, but make the shiny version of Uther Pendragon's dog face with the horns.
Right.
Oh, that helmet. But you again, you're talking about walking into Sword in the Stone, and you're looking, and you're like, okay, there's Conan's sword, there's Excalibur, even if Tony didn't make it, it's there. Where the hell else are you going to see that stuff? You know what I mean? And here's the other funny thing is so for example, meeting you, Kerry, I was like, okay, well, that's Kerry. He's a great, they're doing great work, and that's awesome. And I get to watch and drool over the mastery of the craft that's going on there. Okay, that's fine. It's the same thing as when you meet Tony. When I first met Tony, I'm like, yeah, it's Tony. He's got all these swords and stuff. But then you add 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to it. And then you realize how many people bring up your guys' names. And you're like, well, shit, I know some legends. And I'm like, holy crap. But like people come up, they're like, yeah, my buddy Tony Swatton. And I'm like, we're buddy. I'm like, okay.
Well, it's one of those things where, you know, I think that all three of us kind of, you know, have followed a passion, and, you know, Tony and I, ours is rather parallel, but it's
the same color
still,
equipment.
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways, but, you know, it's still the same thing for you, where it's, you know, something that you were moving in a direction, and you found your passion and you know, and chased it, and so you create what is kind of a life worth living, instead of something that's kind of mediocre that you're just marking days off the calendar. You know, we're not marking days off the calendar. We're watching to the end at this point. We're like, hey, we got to use every day we've got as most we can. So
you know what I always tell everyone?
It's really great.
I always tell everyone, you prove to me I have another life, and I'll waste some time in this one.
Yeah.
Until then,
Exactly.
hell no, I'm living. I'm not disrespecting anybody's beliefs. I'm just saying, prove to me that there's another one, because I'm not saying there isn't, and I'm not saying there is. Until I have that proof, I'm living this one to the fullest. That means if for that moment I want to be that stupid kid wearing my armor, I'll wear that armor. If I want to do the Star Wars thing, I'll do the Star Wars thing. And if you would have told me as a kid that I would have been a stormtrooper, or I would have gotten the chance to meet Tony or you or Peter, you know, Lion.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You know what I mean? And then I get to sit here and joke around with you guys like this. It's like, are you kidding me? Yeah, it's not a dream come true. It's a life that, like you said, you're living. It's not a dream. It's an actual living aspect of life, you know?
All right, guys. Well, I feel like we've probably got enough time in here. We can wrap stuff up, and really glad that you came on. It's really great, and I'm sure that we'll reset and do this again. I'm pretty sure maybe when that happens, you'll be able to tell us a little bit more about the things that are upcoming, because I already have a feeling that I know what a few more of the other things are that you're involved in that you're not speaking at all about. So we'll discuss that as things come up.
Right. Well,
it's be a great time to catch again, and I'm really, really glad you came on. It's definitely been a really fun time. So.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Click the logo to subscribe, or click one of the videos to see more here on the Baltimore Knife and Sword channel, or go to Almy and watch Man at Arms.